Ever get the feeling like, a writer just gets you? That's Katherine Mansfield for me.
Yeah.
It's like her stories are these perfectly crafted, like, snow globes of emotion. And today we are cracking them open to explore the garden party and other stories. Get ready for bustling garden parties, quiet seaside moments, and those tiny, often overlooked, details that make a life, those perfectly observed slivers of experience.
Yeah.
That's where Mansfield thrives.
She has this uncanny ability to make you feel like you're eavesdropping on someone's soul, you know?
Right. And we've got excerpts from some of her most captivating stories, like the garden party, where the vibrancy of a lavish party clashes with this nearby tragedy, or that unsettling image of canna lilies, their beauty almost sinister in the face of death. It's like she drops you right into these moments and lets you just feel your way through them.
What's so fascinating is how she does that. Her signature style is all about, like, keen observation and evocative language. But she takes it a step further with this technique called free indirect discourse.
Okay.
It's a fancy way of saying she slips into the minds of her characters so seamlessly. You experience the world through their eyes.
Yeah.
Feeling their joys and anxieties as your own.
Hold on. Back up a bit. Free indirect discourse. For those of us who haven't spent our lives, dissecting literary techniques.
Right.
Help me out here.
Yeah, so it's like being inside a character's head without the author saying, she thought.
Okay.
It's the difference between telling and showing. So imagine reading, like, the party was beautiful, but she couldn't shake this feeling of unease.
Right.
Versus being right there with her, seeing the way the sunlight glints off the champagne flutes while, a knot of worry tightens in your stomach.
Okay, yeah, I get it now. It's way more immersive. It's like those moments in your own life where you're hit with this wave of emotion and you don't even know why. Mansfield just captures that so perfectly.
Exactly. And while her stories are often set in early 20th century New Zealand, she taps into these universal human experiences, love, loss, longing, that make them resonate with anyone, anywhere, even today.
It's so true. I mean, take the daughters of the late colonel, those two sisters struggling with grief and societal expectations, that feeling of being adrift after a loss, of trying to navigate a world that suddenly feels too big and too empty. That's something we can all connect with, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're swimming in these intensely relatable emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
But these stories are almost a century old. What was going on back then? That shaped Mansfield's world, I mean.
Yeah, that's key, because understanding the historical context, it's like getting, a bonus layer of meaning in these stories. Mansfield captures a society on the edge of change. Think. Like Victorian values, but with a flapper dress peeking out from under the hemline.
So still buttoned up, but maybe sneaking a cigarette when no one's looking?
Precisely. And that tension, it plays out beautifully in the garden party. You've got this opulent party, thrown by this wealthy family, champagne flowing like water, right? But just beyond the garden wall, a man has died in this tragic accident.
Oh, wow.
The contrast is stark.
Yeah, it's like that moment when, you're a kid and you realize not everyone's Christmas is filled with presents and the world suddenly feels a lot less sparkly.
Exactly. And then there's Laura, like the main character, who's deeply affected by this death. She's trying to reconcile her, privileged life with this harsh reality, and it kind of throws her entire worldview into question.
She's like the embodiment of that societal shift you mentioned.
Right.
Like starting to question those old ways of thinking.
Absolutely. And you see similar tensions play out in other stories, too. Marriage a la Mode is a fascinating exploration of the changing dynamics, between husbands and wives in that era. Isabel, the wife, is caught between these two worlds, the traditional role of wife and mother, but also this yearning for self-expression.
It's that age-old struggle of, can I have it all? But in a time when women were just starting to, voice that question out loud.
Exactly. Mansfield doesn't give you easy answers, but she captures the confusion, the exhilaration, and the sheer terror of that moment when, the ground starts to shift beneath your feet.
And she does it through these seemingly insignificant details that suddenly feel, loaded with meaning. Like At the Bay, when the little kid becomes obsessed with a nemeril he finds on the beach. It's just a shell, right? But it becomes this symbol for the magic of childhood, the way kids see wonder in the everyday.
And then in The Voyage, there's this young girl traveling with her grandmother who finds comfort in watching a caged dove bob its head. It's a quiet moment, but it's laced with this unspoken sadness, this sense of being trapped, of longing for something more.
It's like Mansfield's whispering to us, hey, pay attention, this tiny detail. It's actually a universe of emotion. It's incredible how much she packs into these small moments. It's like every sentence has a hidden compartment.
It's her use of symbolism. Those recurring motifs, nature, light and shadow, confinement, they add layers of meaning, hinting at the deeper truths simmering beneath the surface.
Give me an example. I'm hooked on this symbolism thing now.
Okay, well, nature often represents both beauty and fragility in her stories. Think of the garden and the garden party. It's stunning, but it's also a reminder of how quickly life can change. Yeah. How easily things can, like, wither and die. You see it again in the sea and at the bay. And even that caged dove in the voyage becomes this symbol of longing for freedom, for something more than the confines of its cage.
And the way she uses light and shadow, it's like she's highlighting, the hidden parts of ourselves, the good and the bad,
right?
The things we try to keep hidden even from ourselves.
Exactly. And then there's this constant theme of confinement, both literal and metaphorical. The sisters in The Daughters of the Late Colonel, they're trapped by societal expectations, by their grief, by the weight of their family history. And Miss Brill, in her lonely routine, she's confined by her own fear of connection.
It's like Mansfield's showing us that we're all confined in some way, whether it's by our pasts, our fears, or the roles society expects us to play. One of the things that blows me away about Mansfield is how she nails those tiny, almost invisible shifts in emotion. It's like she's tuned into this secret frequency of the human heart.
It's her empathy, yeah. Her deep sensitivity to the nuances of human experience. A fleeting thought, a chance encounter. She understands how these seemingly insignificant moments can ripple out and change the course of a life.
And she does it with such a light touch, It's never over the top or melodramatic, but it hits you right in the feels.
Exactly. It's like she's holding up a magnifying glass to the ordinary, revealing the extraordinary hidden within it. That's what keeps you coming back for more.
Totally. You're constantly stumbling upon these little epiphanies, these moments of clarity that make you see the world and yourself in a whole new light.
Like in her first ball, when Layla, this young girl on the cusp of adulthood, experiences the thrill and the heartbreak of, growing up all in one night. She goes to this dazzling ball expecting magic, but then reality sets in.
Ugh. It's like that moment you realize your parents are just flawed humans, not superheroes.
Right.
The world loses a little bit of its shine.
Exactly. It's about the loss of innocence, the realization that life doesn't always live up to our expectations. Mm-hmm. And then there's The Stranger, where a husband is, eagerly awaiting his wife's return from this long trip. But when she finally arrives, something's different.
Ooh, I felt that one. That awkward tension when you realize you can't go back in time, that you both changed.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's a story about the complexities of, long-term relationships, the way time and distance can, subtly, irrevocably shift the ground beneath your feet. And Mansfield captures that unspoken tension, that sense of unease, with such heartbreaking accuracy.
It's like she's giving us permission to acknowledge those feelings, even the messy ones, even the ones we don't want to admit to.
Exactly. She meets her characters, and by extension, her readers, with such profound empathy and compassion. She doesn't judge, she simply observes and understands.
That's what makes her characters feel so real, so relatable. You root for them, flaws and all.
That's the magic of Mansfield, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
She reminds us that we're all in this messy, beautiful human experience together.
Absolutely. There's this passage from At the Bay that really stuck with me. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. Now the leaping, glittering sea was so bright it made one's eyes ache to look at it. The shepherd drew a pipe, the bowl as small as an acorn, out of his breast pocket, fumbled for a chunk of speckled tobacco, pared off a few shavings, and stuffed the bowl. He was a grave, fine-looking old man. As he lit up and the blue smoke wreathed his head, the dog, watching, looked proud of him.
Isn't that beautiful? Such a simple, everyday scene, but in her hands, it becomes almost sacred.
It's like she slows down time, allowing us to appreciate the quiet beauty of a single moment.
And notice that detail about the dog watching with pride. It's such a small touch, but it speaks volumes about the deep, unspoken bond between humans and animals, the simple joys of companionship.
It's a reminder to pay attention, to find wonder in the everyday, even in the smallest of details.
Exactly. Mansfield's stories are filled with those quiet epiphanies, those moments of grace that often go unnoticed in the rush of life. And that, I think, is why her work continues to resonate with readers nearly a century later. She reminds us to slow down, to savor the present moment, to find beauty and meaning in the everyday. She teaches us to feel it all more deeply, more authentically.
She's like a literary best friend, slipping her arm through yours and whispering, let's explore this feeling together. Let's dive deep.
Yes.
And that's our deep dive into Katherine Mansfield. We hope you enjoyed it.